We continue towards a more startup-oriented topic, and I'm inviting now on stage our moderator, Rehmann. He will introduce all the panelists, and the topic is one of the most important ones, which is unleashing the growth and global expansion, how to scale strategies for startups. And I think we start with an input from your side. Rotem, please come to the stage. Yes, applause. Thank you. Applause, applause.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. I think the rest of the panel members will be joining me soon. I know that you just had lunch, but I still want to ask you, who likes Asian food? Show me your hands. Ooh, okay, nice. So for those of you who haven't raised their hand, you probably found it to be a challenging question, because what is Asian food? Maybe you are fans of Indian curry, but not much into Japanese sushi, or vice versa. Let's use this analogy for the business world. Asia is home to different cultures, economies, and languages. What we've noticed at the German Accelerator is that startups that truly succeed in the region in the long term are the ones that internalize the fact that Asia is not one big market, and they work hard to understand the nuances. During the next few minutes, I want to share some considerations and best practices to help you navigate this diverse and exciting region. So let's take a step back. Why should you ever consider Asia? Many people spoke here during the past 2 days explaining that Asia is a massive market. It's home to 60% of the world population. We see a rapidly growing middle class with a relatively young and tech-savvy population. This means that more people are open to embracing innovation that can improve their lives. On top of that, many Asian investors have a lot of appreciation for made-in-Germany innovations. And finally, the German government has helped startups tap these opportunities through different initiatives. One such initiative is the German Accelerator. We help high-potential German startups expand globally. We are fully funded by the German government, so we don't take any equity from the startups, and most of our programs are not being paid at all by the startups. And the idea is to help the startup get unbiased advice for a network of 350 experts and mentors in the respective markets. Since we've set up shop in Asia 5 years ago, we managed to support more than 300 German startups with their expansion to the top 10 innovation hubs across Asia. And looking at those startups, we managed to identify 3 different stages of readiness for expansion. I want to take the next few minutes to walk you through each one of the stages and share some best practices for each stage. So let's start with education. Let's say you are a startup that is highly interested in going into Asia, but need more information to validate which market is the right market for you. We usually tend to look at 3 main considerations to help you with the initial assessment. So, potential customer base. Most of us usually look at the population size. I want to add another parameter, which is purchasing power, which is represented here by the y-axis, GDP per capita. So you all know that China and India are the world's most populous markets, but if you look at the graph, they're pretty much at the bottom of the scale when it comes to purchasing power. What that means is that if you are a company that is after volume, but not necessarily deal size, for example, in a social media and e-commerce platform, an everyday consumer good, infrastructure solutions, these are good markets for you. And you can probably notice on the other side of the scale, Singapore, a tiny market, pretty much the same size as Berlin metro area, less than 6 million people, to be exact, but very high in terms of purchasing power, one of the leading markets globally. And that's a good fit for premium, niche, high-end solutions. Now let's double-click on industry fit. We've noticed that some industries are in high demand across all Asian markets. E-commerce, we see a growing middle class willing to purchase more, fintech, smart city. However, there are some specific industries that are in higher demand in certain markets. For example, gaming and VR in Korea, health tech and telemedicine in Japan and Indonesia. So we talked about the customer base, we talked about industry fit. Let's look at the softer aspect, communication and business practices. So if you look at English proficiency, this is the indicator that can help you assess how much localization will be required when you enter a new market. Or cultural alignment, you're probably familiar with Erin Meyer's culture map, which helps us see how business is done in different markets, looking at different dimensions. For example, communicating. You can see Germany, very low context, very direct on one side of the scale, and on the far end side of the scale, we can see Japan, very nuanced culture. Or you can see scheduling, and then Japan and Germany are both very much close because they both appreciate punctuality. So there are many complexities and many nuances we need to take into consideration when choosing our beachhead market. And sorry, I want to share an interesting example for effective prioritization. Nautilus Log is a Hamburg-based startup. They joined our program last year. Maybe just to give you some context, they are helping the maritime industry transition from paper-based processes to digital solutions. And together, we help them hone in on Singapore. Why Singapore? It's a tiny market, but it's a global maritime hub. Singapore has the biggest port busiest port in the world. Together, we worked on their strategy, we made valuable introductions, and in less than 1 year, they have local customers, local partnerships, and recently closed a €3 million Series A round. So we talked about education, let's look at exploration. What if you are now more interested in a specific market, but you want to make sure that it's the right fit for you before you take any step? For this case, we usually look at these 3 parameters or considerations. So we all know that that's not new to anyone. When you go to a new market, you want to make sure that there is a pain to be solved for the local customer and determine that they have a willingness to pay. Sounds easy, but not really. In Asia, most likely that customers will not share what they actually think about your solution in your face because people tend to be less direct. What we do in such cases is go through our mentors network. These are the ones who make the initial introductions and ask them to get unfiltered feedback from the customer and then convey it to the startup. So go through a third party. Again, competitive landscape, you go to a new market, you want to assess who are the competitors, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what's their market share. In Asia, you need to be prepared to be compared to another type of competition, manual solutions. Keeping this in mind, you always need to know what's your added value comparing to manual alternatives, keeping in mind that this is a result of relatively low costs of labor. So knowing and demonstrating your return on investment is highly valuable. Lastly, regulatory environment, a topic we all deeply enjoy dealing with, or not. But compliance is the one thing that can really make or break our expansion aspirations. And in these cases, we try to help the startups understand the market, make it accessible as possible in advance through introductions to relevant stakeholders. It can be local government authorities, legal experts, startups who've been in the market, know how everything works, to have as much information in advance as possible. Lastly, execution. You're fully focused, you know that you're going to expand to a specific market, but how do you land successfully? Soon we will hear examples from our panelists who've entered the market, and they wanted to make sure that they're doing the right thing at the right time. In this case, other than external considerations, it's important to know to really adopt best practices. First of all, probably the most important tip I can give you today, build trust. If in most European markets, it's enough to have brand awareness and credibility in order to instill trust, in Asia, there is another component to the equation. If you want to get your customers' trust, what is the one additional thing that you need to have with him? Who knows? Amazing. Spot on. Relationships. What we've seen work in the long term is startups who really take seriously relationships. They're not being transactional. They're pursuing it in the long term, putting effort into building valuable relationships. Only then you can build trust. Then stay focused. Expansion is a journey that takes time and resources, and that's on top of running your business in Germany. I think that focus is the most important thing here. Once again, looking at startups who've done it successfully, they usually focus on 3 to 5 core objectives for the short term. Not only because it helps them to gain clarity, but also because it helps them to convey to their stakeholders how they can better support them. And you will need all the support you could get. And then lastly, be willing to adapt. I know that many of you are probably very successful in Germany, but here the name of the game is not replication, it's adaptation. Be willing to adapt your strategy, your offering to the demands of the local market. And once again, an interesting example for a successful pivot is Tiramisu, a company that joined the program in 2018. Initially, they were offering logistics services and last-mile delivery software in Germany. And very soon, we realized that the logistics space is very cost competitive. And it will take a lot of the resources if they focus on both. So together, we've decided to focus on the software part of their solution. And this proved to be a game changer that led them to massive success. So in 2016, before they joined us, they had one customer in Asia, in the Philippines, and they now have 12 major B2B customers all across Southeast Asia and growing. So to summarize, if you guys are doing well in your home market and you want to expand, Asia has a lot of opportunities to offer. But at the same time, there are many challenges and complexities you need to overcome. If you are keen to learn more, if you're looking for a trusted partner that doesn't charge for his services, I'll be happy to have a chat later at booth number 5. In the meantime, feel free to scan the QR code to assess your eligibility for government support. Thank you, and I now want to call the esteemed panel to join me on stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, do we need some mics? Perfect. Rohit, Steffi, Manori, please join us on the stage. And Ikuo, of course.
It's working? Oh, sorry.
No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. So, Rotem, thank you very much for the great content that you shared with us. We were talking about if we are going to introduce ourselves individually, but then we just decided let's just jump right into the content. And I want to pick up where Rotem started. I was one of the guys who did not raise my hands because I don't know, what do you call Asian food? So I'll start with Steffi here. With your experience of Asia, what do you see as Asia, and when it comes to scaling startups, what's your take on it?
So we expand into the Chinese market, so I can only talk about the Chinese market. And that was quite challenging for us because we were a little bit stupid when we considered to go into the Chinese market. And I saw a lot of things, what you mentioned here, relationship and all that stuff. We could overcome some of these problems, but not all of these problems.
Some of these problems. And I also would like to ask Rohit here, with very elaborate experience in India. And the name that comes to your mind after China, that is India in terms of market, what do you have to say about it?
Thank you, Harris, for the opportunity. Well, I look at the theme of this conference and I find it uncannily resembling the agenda of India. India's agenda is to become a $7 trillion economy by 2030 on the backbone of transition to clean energy, on digital economy, including AI, and mobility and infrastructure. Now, when I looked at this theme and I said, was India talking to the Asia Berlin Summit when they decided to come up with the agenda? Now, if you look at our plans in India, we're looking at 497 gigawatts of clean energy, which is solar energy. We're looking at the Indian government setting up a national program for artificial intelligence. By 2030, we are going to see 30 million two-wheeler EVs on the road in India and 1 million four-wheelers. So the Indian government's intention is to be carbon neutral by 2070. Now, keeping all these factors in mind, any startup which has an agenda which reflects their business are going to make it good in India.
Wow.
Whether they have technologies related to solar energy, technologies related to any alternate source of energy, technologies related to artificial intelligence, which are going to be useful in the sphere of healthcare, education, space technologies, and defense, are going to make it good in India, because the Indian government is very sharply focused on promoting these sectors. There are many incentives, many tax breaks, many advantages which the Indian government offers, which can be explained in detail outside the meeting for startups who wish to come in this sector. The only word of caution is that you don't look at Asia as one, please do not look at India as one. India is a very diverse market, so please be very careful and very clear about which segment or which part of India is your target market. Once you have that in place, have a proper business plan in place. And once you have that, then you're good to go.
Great. Thank you, Rohit. I think opportunities in China, the support infrastructure in India, but at the same time, there is another side to it, that when a startup is actually ready to scale and launch into a new market. And Manori, I would like to ask you, based on your experiences, we were having a great chat the other day. Please shed some light on maybe some of the perspective of Sri Lankan startups and the talent which is there.
Yeah, thanks, Rohit. Harris. Sri Lanka, as I'm sure all of you know, from perspectives of being a great tourist destination, maybe with some great beaches, Ceylon tea, which we are famous for, but at the same time, we also have a very vibrant startup ecosystem. We are not a great tech hub like India, where we don't have the numbers with 22 million people population, but we do have a very, I would say, quality, great talent and innovative mindset of youngsters. Today we can see who are really emerging. And we also are a hub for software development by many European, especially Nordic countries have been investing in Sri Lanka for the last 20, 30 years, really, having their development centers in Sri Lanka. But coming back to the startups, obviously we as startups, we will try to first do an MVP, make it successful in Sri Lanka, perhaps try some of our neighboring countries to be successful, but then we would love to see these youngsters and their ideas being brought to the European market, perhaps, or the US. So looking at those perspectives, there are challenges as well as obviously opportunities, and some of them obviously I would like to say is a young startup who's trying to come into a European market, or start with looking at the product market fit. Does your product really meet a need here in the market? And Rotem, I think, covered many of these basic concepts and principles when you're entering a new market, whichever. Look at the competitive landscape, but very importantly, again, the cultural side of it. Because in Berlin, when you're sitting here, I think, we wonder, are we sitting in Berlin or are we sitting in the US? It's a very metropolitan hub. But your company or your products, if you're trying to sell to German companies who are outside Berlin or in the normal business world, language matters. Knowing the German language is important. Communication is important. How do you, bridge that cultural gap? Those are important aspects to consider, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Manori. So we have a startup perspective, the support infrastructure, but Ikuo, yourself, a serial entrepreneur, an angel investor. So as an investor, how do you see startups who want to enter new markets? What are the things that are red flags for you? And when do you see a startup is ready to launch?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I don't know how many of you see my T-shirt. I'm one of the early investors of the Infam, which is originated out of Berlin and has become a unicorn. And unfortunately, even though Infam had expanded into the, 11 countries, including Japan, but maybe some of you guys know due to the severe headwinds to the startups, so we unfortunately decided to withdraw from the Japanese market actually 2 months ago. So based on that experience, I don't think there is any kind of general rule. It all depends. So the case of the Infam, the reason we expanded into the Japanese market because Infam was targeting to the other big cities, not the other nation. This is because of the Infam philosophy. So the philosophy is how to minimize the other food mileage between the growing area and a consumption area. So based on the other 20th century's technologies, most of the other vegetables are based on the mass production, right? So then we have to grow and harvest the vegetable in the rural area. But that creates the long food mileages. Then consume lots of energies and creating CO2. So that's why, long story make short, so Infam founders invented very small in-store farming unit, which can be deployed into the supermarkets. So when I met the other founders, that was November 18th, 2015, November 18th, they just had the other 1 or 2 pilots. But after I spoke with them, I feel confident they're going to make it happen. Such a insane, crazy idea, and actually happen.
Well, good for you, Ikuo. But so I'm a venture builder, and I think in terms of experimentation and testing the markets. And Rotem, you were talking about one of the strategies that you use is through a network of mentors that you have. What are some of the other experiments that a startup can consider when going into a new market or just testing the waters?
Thank you for the question. So there are definitely many stages before you actually enter the market to assess whether it's a good fit. I mentioned some of them. Maybe to circle back to the previous question that you shared with Ikuo, expansion requires a lot of commitment, financial commitment, but also in terms of time. For those of you who are expecting a quick win, forget about it. So really investing a lot of time, making the right people in charge of the growth process, making them accountable, setting aside a budget, because if you're not setting up a local entity yet, you will need to go back and forth and test the water. So it's really about financial and time commitment that would need to be dedicated.
And Steffi, would you like to add something to it? Yeah.
Yeah, we did a little bit different way because we are not so finance-based, so we don't have so much money on the bank account, so we go an informal way. We know that 50% of our potential customers in the Chinese market, maybe one of you can guess what we are doing. We have something related to Amazon. So 50% of the sellers on Amazon are Chinese companies. So for us, it was a quite attractive market. So we thought we have to go there. Nevertheless, if we are really ready for that. And how we did it is we contacted influencers in the market, show them our software, and try to convince them to use them and spread the word about that. It's a small flame, but it looks like right now it's working. But at a certain state, we have also be local there. That is one of, I would say, the key driver for us right now, how we grow into the market without a huge money on the bank account.
Yeah, that's definitely a strategy to test. But Rotem, I feel you want to say something.
Just a quick comment. So I think it's a very good strategy, but once again, it depends. When is a good time to start working with partners? How low touch do you want to be? How important for you it is to feel the local customers? So, I mean, amazing that it worked for you guys, but I think it's probably not a one fit all, right?
Definitely not, definitely not.
Okay, testing the waters first, getting your, let's say, some experiments ready already in the market for localization. But one very important aspect of entering a new market is acquiring partners. And we have heard a lot of people that you need to have relationships in Chinese market or in Asian market in general as well. And I would like to direct this question to Manori because of her elaborate experience as an ambassador for Sri Lanka in Germany for a lot of years. How do you see that? How do you think startups can make it lean and get, somehow, are there any shortcuts to making relationships?
I'm not sure whether there's any shortcut to it, but I think relationships are really important here in Germany as well, from what I have seen. Trust, and I think building that trust and credibility, it takes time. Keeping to your word, and sometimes our Asian mentality is like, we say, okay, I'll deliver something today, but not really meaning to deliver it. So I think there's been a lot of not so great experiences for the Germans who are working with Asian companies expecting a delivery on time. So it's important to mean what you say. If you can't deliver it, please do not give commitments, and that's the way you can build that trust and the relationship, to be able to, someone has to be able to be dependent on you when you say something. So I think that I also realized, in the end, there is connections, the relationship, the networks are really important factors. It's not just in Asia, even here in Germany, I have noticed that there's like an old boys club going on sometimes, right? So you have to see how do you make inroads in that, and it's not an overnight thing. And I think relationships, it takes time here for someone to, let you even call you by your first name as a German. The older generation especially, I know that from experience. So these are nuances that someone needs to be able to understand. Takes time, and building a partnership, if you have a good collaborator or leveraging the network that's here. For example, with Asia Berlin. Great mentors, great friends who are there ready to guide you. So, leverage that.
So we covered localization, to some extent. I'm sure we need hours and hours of conversation just to, maybe scratch the surface. Also the partnerships. And one very important factor that you need to have local investors, I think they understand the market. And your background, Rohit, in finance, I was talking to a friend yesterday and he told me in Bangalore, raising funds is not a problem. Is that true?
Well, as a matter of fact, raising funds in India is not a problem if you have a good business plan. There are enough private equity firms who, they like your idea, they like the way that you do your business, they like the way you've put together a team to implement it, and you're not the type who's going to burn cash. Many startups fail in India particularly because they burn cash. A lot of the promoters of startups, they first fill up their homes. They get a Porsche and they get a nice house and all of that, and before they know it, they've run out of money. And the private equity firms are very cautious now of these kind of startups. So they're looking for genuine ideas, which are sustainable ideas, which fit into the needs of the population in general, and it's good to go. It's like, in India they say that you can even sell sand. That's how big the market is for a diverse range of products. So you have a passion for a product or a service, and you structure yourself well to do the business in India, there's no dearth of money. Whether it's a private equity fund, and if you're doing a startup in an area which the government is very interested in, say infrastructure, or artificial intelligence, or other such areas, they will fund you. Because they are very keen to develop a body of intellectual capability in these areas in the country for the sustainable future. So there is going to be no dearth of money for a genuine startup.
When you say they'll find you, it just makes me a bit scared. But let's say...
I said fund you, not
okay,
find you.
Okay. So now we have...
It's not that sinister.
So now we have entered the market. We have relationships. We also have access to funds. And we are not a startup anymore. So we are about to become a scale-up. And that's where maybe Inform comes in. How do you keep your existence solid throughout the years? And is there an exit strategy? Because if there's a German startup, of course, they want to capitalize the market. But at some point, I meet a lot of founders, they want to exit at some point. So what kind of exit strategies we can consider?
It's a very good question, but very difficult to answer. In Japan, this is about the only startups. I would say more than 80% of the exit is IPO. Because in Japan, there is the stock exchange market, which allows startups to go public by the other small cap. Of course, the definition is how much would be the small cap. So the case of Inform, because we were running a 100% subsidiary of the German parent company. So as Inform Japan, so we didn't have any kind of intellectual properties or technologies, etc. Everything comes from the parent company. So then to go public is very, very difficult. So Inform didn't think the exit of the other Japanese entity. So, but this is just a hypothetical kind of talk. So if something happens, maybe the stakeholders, like clients or the retail network suppliers, etc., going to have a share of Inform Japan. That would be might be the exit. And apart from this topic, one thing I would like to mention is the case of Inform. We were lucky because I'm a shareholder and I became a managing director. So we or they didn't have to find any local management, right? But the most cases that they have to find local talents to run the other business. But in Japan, it's my shame, but even though the other, let's say, 10 or 15 years experience, manager, but to find the other people who speak business level English and also understanding the business of the parent company is not really easy. So we were struggled to find the other talents who needed to interface with the parent company, every single different division. So that's the lessons learned from my case.
Well, thanks, Ikuo. I mean, there is so much to it. There are so many factors to consider, and we can possibly not scratch even the surface in 25 minutes. But let's say 20 seconds each, and we haven't been able to introduce ourselves. What is that one thing that founders should reach out to each of you when they are considering scaling to an Asian market? Steffi, you go ahead first.
Oh, I think I can talk for hours what I learned and where I failed. So, but if you're considering to go into the Chinese market, I'm happy to share some insights. And what I can definitely give as an advantage, try it. Even you have not millions on a bank account to do it, make some baby steps and see if you like it, if your product fits there, and then go a big step.
Yeah, I would say invest time, build connections, and be open-minded, or probably the top three.
Rohit, what do you want people to reach out to you?
Well, there are a lot of opportunities in India. We are the third largest startup ecosystem in the world with 90,000 startups, more the merrier. The government offers a lot of tax breaks, a lot of incentives. There are a lot of benefits if you're a recognized startup. So if you want to get advantages, we can help you get registered as an official startup to get these benefits and advantages, so you get a good head start to establishing your business in India.
Thank you, Rohit.
Okay, so I would think you may have the greatest product that you have invented or innovated. If you don't tell that story out in the correct way, that is, you convey the right message, the branding, the position, how do you communicate your value proposition? I think that is absolutely key. How do you tell your story in a passionate way and still sell your value along with it? So happy to help in any of those areas.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just come to Japan and enjoy sushi, then discuss.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, my distinguished panel.